With 154 victories at the end of his 12-year tenure as head coach of the Buffalo Bills, our guest speaker became the 10th winningest coach of all time and the only coach in NFL history to lead his team to 4 consecutive Super Bowl appearances. Twice named Coach of the Year by the United Press International, he is credited with rebuilding the popularity of Bills football and setting both club and national in-stadium attendance records. Prior to joining the Bills, our speaker coached the NFL's Kansas City Chiefs, as well as the Montreal Alouettes of the Canadian Football League and the Chicago Blitz of the United States Football League. He has also served as a color commentator for both ESPN and NBC. His collegiate coaching experience includes terms at the College of William & Mary, the University of California, and the University of New Mexico. This morning's speaker was a standout running back in football and a sprinter on the track team at Coe College, where he became a Phi Beta Kappa graduate in 1950. He also earned a master's degree in English history from Harvard University in 1951. Please join me in welcoming Coach Marv Levy.
Thank you very much. I'm going to apologize a little bit because some of you were in the audience last night. Jay was on a cruise that I appeared at a few months ago, and so you may have heard some of the points that I hope that I can make this morning in visiting here with you. Now, you know, the great statesman and orator Winston Churchill once said you never should start a speech with the words, "It gives me great pleasure." They're too hackneyed, they're too trite. In fact, he belonged to a speaking group in England, and that was their watchword. Do not start a speech with the words, "It gives me great pleasure." Well, this particular speaking group periodically would meet, and they had an exercise whereby the names of one of the members was drawn at random from a box, and a topic that he was to speak upon was drawn at random from another box, and at one particular time, the name, Winston Churchill, was drawn. The topic was drawn. The topic was sex. Well, Winston proceeded to the podium and said, "It gives me great pleasure," and sat down. Well, if he's allowed one exception, so am I, because it does give me great pleasure to be here in Western New York. I know this is an area which is extremely strong in its support of the Buffalo Bills. I've always enjoyed when I've had opportunities to visit here, being present. I have since I arrived late yesterday, and I'm happy to be here right now with you. But I'm going to ask you, even though this is a pleasant time, to come back with me to another time. And if you would, for just a moment, I'd like to share it with you, because late in the evening, on the last Sunday of January in 1991, I stood along the sidelines at Tampa Stadium, and gathered there with me were approximately 50 other Buffalo Bills players and coaches. And out on the field were 11 additional of our players. And on the field, the eyes of a sports-loving nation was transfixed. For 7 unrelenting months, we had worked together and lived together 7 days a week, up to 16 hours on most of those days. And now the bold numbers up on the scoreboard clock showed that a mere 8 seconds remained in that odyssey. We had begun on a hot, humid July day at our training camp site at Fredonia, New York. The score was 20-19. The New York Giants were leading. There were 20 seconds. There was a minute and a half left to play when we took over the ball on our own 15-yard line. Draw play to Thurman, slant pass to Andre Reed, another pass to James Lofton. We sent our field goal team out on the field with 8 seconds to remain on the opponent's 29-yard line. Well, you know what happened, most of you. Ball rose into the air. Everybody turned and looked, and the ball went that far outside the upright. The immediate result, the New York Giants were world champions, fair and square. Imagine their elation. Imagine our despair But that wasn't the final result, because when that ball fluttered to the right of the goalpost that night in Tampa Bay, the story could have ended there, but it didn't. And I'd like the rest of this morning maybe to share with you another story. And it's a sequel. And if, for want of a better title, I'll call it The Uphill Heart. It's one I lived with some wondrous people during most of the rest of the decade. It's a story of thrills and some bitter disappointments, some unbelievable comebacks, a story of hard work, and it's a story of battling overwhelming odds. But most of all, it's a story which helped me to learn how to overcome challenges, to deal with disappointments, and most important of all, to build for future successes. On that trip back from Tampa the next morning, as I sat on the plane coming back, after you can imagine how we felt the night before, some words came back to me from a slim book of poetry my mother had given me when I left for the Army Air Corps in 1943. I hadn't thought of those words for almost 50 years, but they were words written by an anonymous English poet about a 15th century Scottish warrior, Sir Andrew. Those words were, "Fight on, my men," Sir Andrew said. "A little I'm hurt, but not yet slain. I'll just lie down and bleed a while, and then I'll rise and fight again." Well, the next day we had our final team meeting. We always do on the day after the final game of the season. And I posted those words on the bulletin board, that poem on the bulletin board. Had our meeting, went over what we were going to plan for the off season and the coming season. When the meeting ended, about 8 or 10 of the players came up to me and said, "Coach, do you happen to have a copy of that poem?" I was a little surprised, but I said yes and got it printed up and distributed it to them. Over the next 6, 7, 8, 9 years, whenever a particularly disappointing occurrence happened for the Buffalo Bills, somebody, I don't know if it was the same player or different ones, would post that poem on the bulletin board. It was the theme for our football team. They were bywords by which they lived, the ability to bounce back from disappointments, to lick their wounds for a while. It was the type of attitude which allowed our team at a later time, when we were trying to get into our third Rose Bowl appearance, to make a comeback unparalleled in the annals of the National Football League. At halftime, as you all recall, in the first playoff game of the 1993 season, we trailed the Houston Oilers 28-3. We had gone into the game without Jim Kelly, without Bruce Smith, without Thurman Thomas, without Cornelius Bennett, 4 of our great, great players, all injured. And we were playing abominably, as you can imagine, 28-3. And even though I didn't believe it, at halftime, our quarterback coach, Jim Schaffner, was talking with Frank Reich, who was playing quarterback in that game. And I walked up to Frank and tried to encourage him a little bit. And I said, "Frank, you're going to lead the greatest comeback in the history of the National Football League this second half." Well, as we were walking back up the tunnel, Jim Schaffner, the quarterback coach, said, "You know, Marv," he said, "we're down by 25 points. He said, "The greatest comeback, the team that came back from 28 points down." I said, "Frank doesn't know that. Don't worry about it." Well, they kicked off on our first possession. Frank faded back to throw a pass to Keith McKellar, our tight end. I can't remember the name of the Houston player. A cornerback picked it off and ran it in for a touchdown. They were now winning 35-3. We were now down by 32 points. Well, most of you know the rest of the story, and I won't go step by step through it, but we came back and won the game, the greatest comeback in the history of the National Football League. You can imagine what that locker room was like after the game. Everybody celebrating, hugging each other, singing songs. Frank finally came up to me. He said, "Coach," he said, "by the way," he said, "I knew that 25 wasn't enough." He said, "That's why I threw." I said, "Frank, I'm going to tell you a bigger lie. I believe you." Well, in coming back, you don't just do it. You don't just set your jaw. There's a procedure that we followed. Yes, we mourned, and believe me, it hurt, for a period of time, and that is important. You mourn for a period of time. Was it 10 days or 2 weeks? Yes, and then we put it behind you. We won't belabor the loss, or the losses we've had in the Super Bowl. We would have preferred winning one or all of them, but we hadn't. But if you're going to come back, you don't lie there in the fetal position. So you mourn for a while. Then you own up. What could we have done better? What could we do that made more sense, that was a healthier approach? And I would ask that, and I'd ask our players to evaluate that in themselves, and everybody in our organization to evaluate that. So mourn, own up, recognize the good. Our players accomplished tremendous things, great camaraderie, great belief in one another, affection, actually. Had we done things for the community? Yes. Had the community done things for us? Yes. Recognize the good. Then form a plan. Don't just, again, sit there and dawdle. That was the fourth step in the formula we felt was very important. And finally, I mean, to form a plan, I don't care how good the plan is. A brilliant idea is but a job half done. Act. Go to work. And that's the hard part. But it can be drudgery. I mean, you don't just say, oh, we're going to go to work and everything will be fine tomorrow. It takes a lot of work to come back. Well, as a coach, and maybe this relates to many of you in the room who are leaders in this community, but as a coach, I was responsible for providing leadership and for developing attitudes which breed success. Those were leadership and developing attitudes which breed success. Well, let me start out by defining what I think leadership is. This is not from the dictionary. I think leadership is the ability to get other people to get the very best out of themselves. I think it's the ability to get other people to get the very best out of themselves. Some people do it in different ways. I'll try and talk about how we approached it. And how do you manifest it? It's manifested not by getting people to follow you, but by getting them to join you. And they join you because they believe in you, and they believe in the integrity of what you're asking them to do. That to me, if I had to sum it up in a hurry, is what leadership is. I'll tell you what I don't think it is. I don't think it's kicking butt or showing who's boss. I really don't think it's that. I don't want to make those statements and have you confuse the sentiment I just expressed with tolerating laxity or not requiring accountability. I'll get to that in a few moments here. I think it's very important. One of the best compliments I ever got from a player, well, when I say one of the best, maybe the only one I ever got from a player, was from a player who was a great one, Bruce Smith. After he'd been there 8 or 10 years, one day I talked to him about something I didn't like that had happened, and about a day or so later he came back to me. He said, you know, Marv, he said, the time I know you really mean business is when you lower your voice. When you lower your voice, not when you raise it. So, and I did take that as a compliment. Well, I'm here this morning also with what I hope is some good news. And I can express that good news in one sentence. It's the same sentence that I spoke to the players on the Buffalo Bills team in mid-season of 1986 when I was appointed, I was during mid-season, as head coach of the Buffalo Bills, and walked in on a Monday morning early in November to meet with the team for the first time. I didn't know what a lucky fellow I was. Sitting in that room was a young Jim Kelly and a young Bruce Smith and a young Andre Reed and some other fine individuals. But over the past 3 years, they'd won a total of 6 games. And the little studying I had been able to do of the team, I knew that their talent level was better, but they did lack some confidence. And the first words I spoke to them, and I'll speak them to you too, the good news. What it takes to succeed is simple, but it isn't easy. But it isn't easy. It's simple. You can define it in a nutshell. I was an assistant to a great coach in the league, George Allen. He once told me, he said, Marv, what we're going to do here is the ordinary things in an extraordinary way. He said, I want you to know something. West Coast offense, zone blitz, that's all fine. He said, almost every coach in the league is good with the X's and O's. He said, but if we run, block, tackle, catch, throw, kick better than our opponent, we're going to win. We're going to win. Ordinary things in an extraordinary way. Booker T. Washington said about the same thing. Excellence is to do a common thing in an uncommon way. So I talked about what it takes to succeed is simple, not easy. That word succeed keeps creeping in. I defined leadership a little while ago. I said it wasn't from the dictionary. Allow me, if you will, to define success, and this time I did go to the dictionary in my effort to define success, and the dictionary informed me that success is a favorable or desired outcome. Well, with the policies of Mr. Webster, that's not sufficient. I don't like it. I don't like his definition. He's not going to change it, but I still don't like it. I don't think it's a destination, a favorable desired outcome. I think it's a journey. It's a way of doing things. And more good news, it's a journey to be thoroughly enjoyed. Thoroughly, I don't mean to enjoy it like an old movie actor I once heard about named George Raft, who always played the part of a very sophisticated, or maybe a gambler, high liver type of guy. George Raft in real life, when he was on his deathbed, had gone through a fortune of $10 million. Today, that's a lot of money. Back then, it was an unbelievable amount. He was once asked, how did you dissipate a fortune of $10 million in your lifetime? He said, well, some of it I spent on women, some of it on booze, and some of it on horses, and the rest I spent foolishly. Well, I'm not advocating that type of enjoyment right now. Perhaps a president of Harvard University around the turn of the century, at his retirement speech to a group of faculty, students, and alumni, said that it's not what we accomplish which I shall remember the most, it's what we shared. So it's a journey that is to be thoroughly enjoyed. As a coach, I feel that there are three essential qualities to becoming a good football, that all good football coaches have. One, the ability to teach or convince, get them to join you, not follow you. And there are personality differences. Vince Lombardi, Mike Ditka are very bombastic, very verbose. Tom Landry, Chuck Noll, Bud Wilkinson were great football coaches who are much quieter than the first two I mentioned. But all of them had the ability to teach, convince their students or the people with whom they work. Secondly, the ability to work well with others, and I cannot emphasize strongly enough how important that quality is. Nothing can overcome the harm caused, in my opinion, as a football coach now, by a staff member who acts as if he knows it all. It leads to rifts, and one of the most dangerous things that keep you from recovering, placing of blame. Rifts and placing of blame. Beware the best arguer on your staff. I caution coaches who go out and become head coaches when they leave my staff. I tell them, you notice how often a person who knows the least says it the most loudly. Now, again, I'm not advocating being a wimp or clamming up for the sake of harmony. By no means. I think people should express their opinions. But what I am advocating here is a show of respect for your colleagues or those with whom you work, a no show of disdain, and replace the words, "that's a dumb thing to say," with, "I don't agree," if you sincerely don't. And then the third quality, I think, of every successful coach or any successful business is honesty. And I can reflect it in recruiting. Don't promise a player something you know you may not be able to deliver. If you come here, young man, you're going to be our starting quarterback. How unfair are you being to anybody else that's a quarterback on your team? Are you going to have to mealy-mouth later if somebody else is better than him? Promise him he'll get a good shot at it. There's no sense bringing him. And if you are honest with the people with whom you work, they begin to know it, and they know when you're not. My father once told me, he said, if you tell the truth, Marv, you never have to remember what you said. Honesty, a tremendously important quality. It results in building loyalty, belief, even devotion among those with whom you work. And I felt that that's the third most important, not the third most, the third important quality in a good football coach. Part of honesty is clean football. And one of the things I loved about Bruce Smith, he was a clean football player. He prided himself on being a clean football player. The only time I ever experienced his refusing to do something when an assistant coach instructed him to do something which would lead to an injury to an opponent's player outside the rules. Now, Bruce wasn't just a do-good guy, by the way. He would express himself. He's a very outspoken young man. In fact, in his rookie year, he was in the locker room getting dressed before a game, and in professional football, you are required to wear long stockings as part of your uniform. It's not the case in collegiate football. It was a very, very hot, humid night. We were playing a preseason game, and Bruce was pulling these long wool socks up, and he turned to the veteran player next to him, and he said, "Who the hell's idea is this to wear long socks?" Just as Mr. Wilson was walking in the room. Well, about 10 years later, Mr. Wilson had spearheaded a dress code regulation at the league meetings which required the wearing of long socks. Well, Bruce didn't know this, but the veteran player did, and said to Bruce, he said, "Well, that's Mr. Wilson's idea." Bruce glanced at him and he said, "Damn good idea." Clean football is what I respected most about Don Shula, among his many other accomplishments. He taught clean football. What about the essential ingredients for successful team building? I think there are three. One, surround yourself with people who have the temperament necessary. I called it football temperament. And I'm going to speak quickly on what I think those qualities are. Mr. Wilson asked me, "What do you mean by you want players with football temperament?" And I said, work habits. Give me players and coaches who aren't willing to work, but who want to work. That's one of the accountability. Show up for work every day without having to tug him to be there. Know that you can rely on him. Love of the game, not just the rewards. I can remember when I was first appointed as the head coach at the University of New Mexico. At that time, I was the youngest major college head coach in the country. In 1997, I was the oldest coach in the National Football League, so time had passed. But I do recall the kickoff before the first game of my coaching career at the University of New Mexico. I gathered the players around. They'd worked hard. I felt all the excitement. I still felt like I wanted to play. I was young enough. I later got better sense than that. But I still felt that way. And here we were in that stadium. It was filled, all that color, those college fight songs, pretty cheerleaders on the sideline. And I just blurted out to the players, "Where else would you rather be than right here, right now?" Well, it's something I've said before the kickoff of every game I ever coached since that time, because I loved being there. It was exciting. It was fun. What else? Unselfishness. That's just the definition of teamwork. The definition of teamwork. The first year that I was coach with the Buffalo Bills, our director of player personnel, a man for whom I have a lot of respect, and I say, disagree. We disagreed in this one instance here. And I have great regard for him and his abilities. He wanted us to draft an outstanding player from a West Coast school. Just a great player. I was reluctant. There's another player I had our eyes on. In fact, it was Shane Conlon over here from Penn State, from Frewsburg. Actually, this other player had graded out a little bit better than Shane. They both graded very high, but he graded out better than Shane. In fact, almost everybody in the country. But I said, no, I don't want this fella. There are too many uncertainties about him. He's been a bad actor. He misses practice. He badmouths his teammates. He's been on the fringe of the law. We don't want him. And Norm said, Marv, Norm Pollum was the personnel director's name. Overlook it. This guy is unbelievable talent. I said, no, Norm, I don't want him. He said, take a look at the statistics. And they were awe-inspiring. I said, well, Norm, statistics, fine. They're a little bit like a bikini. They show you a lot, but not everything. And so we went on. Finally, he tried to hit me with the clincher, and he said, if we draft this guy, he's going to go to the Pro Bowl. I said, Norm, we're going to draft Shane Conlon because he's going to help take us to the Super Bowl. So unselfishness, a very important part of what you do. I'm not saying talent isn't important. The great Bear Bryant, coach at Alabama, one of the greatest coaches in collegiate football history, some will argue the greatest in collegiate football history, was interviewing a young coach. Gene Stallings was his name. Gene later became a fine coach, later coach at Alabama, and said, Gene, you tell me when you go out and recruit, what type of young man are you going to look for? He said, well, Coach, I'm going to look for the type of guy that if you knock him down, he's going to get up. And if you knock him down again, he's going to get up again. And if you knock him down a third time, he's going to get up again. And Brian said, to hell with that. Get me that guy that's knocking him down. So I do not want to say that talent isn't an important component here. The second ingredient for successful team building, an unquenchable striving for success. Preparation as opposed to posturing. Preparation as opposed to posturing. The statement I hate most from a coach. I hate to, you know how I hate to lose? Boy, do I hate to lose. It's like no one else does. It's like someone else likes to lose, you know, like, do something about it. Knut Rockne, coach at Notre Dame very early in the century, renowned among coaches and anybody that follows football, once said that the will to, you always heard the term, let me back off for a moment on Rockne's quote. You've always heard the term, do you have the desire to win? Oh, do you have the desire? I have the desire. Boy, do I have the desire to win. Rockne said, the will to prepare is every bit as important as the will to win, because you don't possess the will to win if you lack the will to prepare. So preparation, extremely important. Ralph Waldo Emerson said success is just a matter of luck. Ask any failure. Preparation. And the final ingredient, ask good PR. You may blink a little and say, wait a minute, isn't that sort of the antithesis of what you've been talking about, a lot of hard work, and now you're talking about PR? Well, if you think by PR I mean public relations, then I'm not communicating very well. I don't mean public relations. I mean P, persistence, R, rejection, or more specifically, how you react to rejection. And those two qualities are married. Those two qualities are married. The players I worked with at the Buffalo Bills were the most persistent son of a guns I've ever been associated with. Persistence is the antidote for failure. Again, I'll quote Emerson. Failure often is just an opportunity to begin again more intelligently. The only way to succeed is to be brave enough to risk failure and sometimes to experience it. Persistence is toughness of character. Persistence is toughness of character. And it's also a manifestation of character. And how about rejection? What's the worst reaction to rejection? Giving up. Giving up. Lying there in that fetal position. Making excuses. Making excuses. Bad reaction. I even know of one person who blamed the Lord once for something that occurred. Happened to be caught in a terrible flood, and the waters were rising. Was standing on his front porch. A rowboat came by, and the men in the rowboat said, "Sir, get in. The weather's supposed to get worse." He said, "No, the Lord said he'd take care of me." The boat left. Rains came down harder and harder. Now he's in his upstairs bedroom window, water up to his chest. Another rowboat came by, said, "Sir, get in. The dam is supposed to break. It's going to get worse." "No, the Lord said he'd take care of me." Now he's on the roof of his house, water up to his chin, and still raining very hard. A helicopter hovers overhead. A person up there yells, "Grab that rope, we'll pull you in. Things are going to get even worse." He said, "No, the Lord said he'd take care of me." The helicopter left. Well, the water did rise. The man did perish, but he'd lived a wonderful, exemplary life. He went to heaven. When he met with the Lord, he was grateful to be there. He said, "But Lord," he said, you let me down." He said, Lord said, "What do you mean I let you down?" He said, "You said you'd take care of me." The Lord said, "Well, I sent you 2 rowboats and a helicopter." So sometimes you got to do something for yourself also. You know, the missing ingredient in everything I've been talking about here right now is a subject about which I'm asked most often, and that's motivation. Coach, how do you motivate a football team? As if, boy, there's a specific pep talk. What's the gimmick that you'd use to motivate a team? And this is a topic I love. And the answer in this particular instance is simple, and it is easy. It is simple. How do you motivate a football team? Select intrinsically motivated players. Select intrinsically motivated players. Motivation is the ability to get other people to get the best out of themselves, but they have to be receptive. They have to be receptive. Let me give you an example of an unmotivated player that we had in our training camp a number of years ago. We brought the fellow in. He had good physical qualities. Everything looked good, but he'd keep making the same mistake. I tried to coach him. I tried to instruct him. He'd make the same mistake again. I began to feel he wasn't listening. He was inattentive. Finally, I was very exasperated. I stopped practice. I walked out. He said, "Young man, tell me something. Are you dumb or just apathetic?" And he said, "I don't know, and I don't care." Well, that man is now an alumnus of the Buffalo Bills, by the way. Well, so far it's been a pretty grim journey, hasn't it been? Persistence, rejection, hard work, set jaw, gimlet eye stare, rather dismal. Very important. Enjoy the trip. Enjoy the trip. Even my wife, Fran, now and then you got to rest, take it easy. When she gets tired of shopping, she sits down, tries on shoes. So, I usually only tell that when she's here, but enjoy the trip. I had a high school teacher, wonderful lady. Her name was Alice B. Conlon. Great name for a teacher, initials ABC. Alice B. Conlon, when she retired, a number of us, 20 years after we graduated high school, attended her retirement ceremony. And she was asked how she chose teaching for her lifetime work. She said, "Where else would I find such splendid company?" And so enjoying the trip is very important. How do you enjoy it? Love what you're doing. I talk about love what you're doing. Don't put money first or security first. Love what you're doing. If Michelangelo had decided to play it safe, he would have painted the floor of the Sistine Chapel. Enjoy your trip and don't worry about it. How do you enjoy it? Welcome some uncomfortable moments. Those are opportunities to enhance your self-esteem. What I liked most about my job with the Bills, in the course of a Sunday afternoon, I had to make 200 decisions. 30 seconds to make each one of them, and Don Shula, Mike Ditka on the other sideline throwing a tantrum, sort of made it fun. Made it fun. How do you enjoy yourself? How do you enjoy yourself? Believe in yourself. But the caveat, I'll revisit something I said, is preparation. The essential ingredient for building morale is to feel that you're prepared. How do you enjoy yourself? Don't be too harsh on yourself. Andrew Jackson said it pretty well. He said, God wisely designed the human body so that you can't too easily pat your own back or kick your own behind. So enjoy yourself. Expect some criticism. Don't cave into it. Certainly I care what the fans think, but you can't react to everything a fan thinks he ought to do. That's why I have that one sign on my door. If a coach starts listening to the fans, he winds up sitting next to them. Harry Truman said it well. Any fool can condemn, criticize, and complain, and he usually does. How do you enjoy yourself? Have principles and beliefs, but be flexible. Listen to the other fella. Don't feel you have to be right. A number of years ago, I did not want to make the trade of what it cost to bring Cornelius Bennett to the Buffalo Bills. We had to give up 2 first-round and a second-round draft choice. And Bill Polian, the general manager, said to me, "Marv, listen to me." And I listened. And it doesn't always happen. He convinced me of the merit of it, and I'm glad I listened. And I'm glad that we went forward and did get him. Martin Luther King Jr. once said that some actions are taken because they're the popular thing to do, some because they are good politics, and some actions are taken for the third reason because they're the right thing to do. If 1 or 2 ever comes in conflict with number 3, he wisely counseled, do number 3. Do the right thing. Do the right thing. Success is measured in a lot of ways. Victories and defeats, of course. More than that, it's also measured by the effect of what we do has on other people. When I retired from the Buffalo Bills at the end of the 1997 season, before I went to the final press conference, I had a meeting of our team, and I told them what was going to happen. And I left them at that final meeting with a wish list for them. And with some adaptation now, adjustment now, I'd like to have that wish list for those of you in this room, present that wish list to those of you in this room. I wish for all of you an idealism that lasts a lifetime. For the day you become a cynic is the day you're going to lose your youth. I wish for you difficulties, but not an inordinate number. I wish for you the capacity to laugh often, frequently at yourself. I wish for you friends who have earned your trust and a trustworthiness that earns you friends. I wish for you just the right amount of impatience, and I wish also for you the opportunity upon occasion to be a 7-point underdog. I wish for you tolerance, given and received. And I wish for you being able to say, often with a touch of wonderment in your voice, where else would I rather be than right here, right now? And then finally, I wish for you certain, for want of a better way to describe it, mechanical skills, I'll call them, the kind which will enable you, when necessary, to rebuild broken dreams, the kind which will allow you to say always, the best is yet to come. It's been a pleasure for me to be able to visit with you this morning, and thank you for having me. Sure. Yeah.
Well, that was a pleasure. I wrote down the one about the shoes. But I wouldn't say it if my wife was in the room. Ms. Levy will be happy to take questions.
I'll be happy to take any questions, depending on your time. I'm fine here, so yes, sir.
This is pretty far out, but have you got any thoughts as to how they can improve the abominable officiating they had last season?
Well, they're going back to a form of instant replay, the type of which I wouldn't have liked to see. In other words, the challenge system. Used in the stands, and the people home on television see the game, honestly, better than we do, whether someone was inbounds or out. Technology has put officiating under unbelievable scrutiny right now, and I think they need to use technology in order to improve it. My suggestion on the type of instant replay they should have, which would be the most unobtrusive type, my suggestion would be have an official sitting upstairs who views the game on a monitor, and if between the time one play ends and the next one begins in the normal flow, he determines something should have been changed, he makes the call down to the field, and they change it now. Not a stoppage and review and run it back 85 times. There have been times that I've been in the stadium when a play has occurred, and you'll look up on the Jumbotron in the stadium. The Jumbotron will show that the man was out of bounds and the official called him in, and the teams are back in the huddle getting ready to go. That could be corrected. You scream at the officials to look up there. They won't look because they can't reverse it. They don't want to see that they were wrong. I think overall they're conscientious. They work hard. I've seen many of the errors they've made when I've seen the play on TV. The official said, yes, he caught the ball. And I said, yeah, it looked to me like he caught the ball. Now, TV reruns it 40 times from various angles. I said, oh my gosh, he didn't catch it after all. And now the TV announcers lambaste the officials, and it can become quite a controversial situation. So I think instant replay of the type I mentioned, you be able to recognize between the play that it was wrong, and no one even knows it's being reviewed. And if it is, reverse it. That's my suggestion. Any other questions? Yes, sir.
You said intrinsically motivated. It made me think of Chris Spielman. I just wondered, with his heart and abilities, I was sorry that the Bills didn't have a place to keep him.
The last part I didn't hear. You wonder what?
I was just sorry that the Bills didn't have a way to keep him on the team with what he went through and all the heart that he brings to it.
That's right. Yeah. This is what I understand about it. Again, I'm not right in the inner chambers anymore, but I do talk with John Butler maybe once or twice a week, once every couple of weeks, the general manager. They had Chris back. Chris said he was 100% and ready to go, and John told him, he said, we are going to draft some other linebackers. John Holisek did play well, and the situation is going to be open and competitive right now, and he was being honest with him, and Chris read it as being, well, my salary's up there, and I think they may look to replace me if one of these, and I don't want to come into that type of situation. I'm from Ohio. I think if you let me go, maybe I get another shot. So that was it. They would have liked to have him back. I don't think he wanted to be. He felt he had been more senior than to be in the position of being back in the competitive mode. And truthfully, John told him, I can't tell you you've got the position lined up.
His injury, his spinal injury that he had.
He had an operation, a fusion of something in his spine. I can't talk medically about it. I tell you, my approach, I don't know exactly what it is, but he's been given medical clearance. And let me tell you what my position always was on anything medical, and I know I'm digressing here. Somebody asked me, how do you know when to play a player or not player? It was easy. Easy for me to know whether a player should play or shouldn't. If the medical people said he shouldn't, he didn't. I said, well, can't he just do it? If they said he shouldn't, he didn't. Or if the player told me, I don't care what they say, I can't do this. I maybe in 47 years of coaching, I might have known 2 players who may be gold bricked. When a player tells me he can't do it, he can't do it, and I know it. I know he can't. But I can't tell you what exact nature of his medical condition was.
Marv, who was the most combative coach you ever met next to Ditka?
There are a lot of them. Even the quiet ones are combative. Believe me, I talked about Tom Landry being quiet and so on. But in terms of vocal, Ditka let his emotions hang out. I'm trying to think back. The guy that coached me probably was the other one when I was in college. Was pretty back when I was in high school. I was one of 4 sophomores that made the football team. And things were different in those days, by the way. I finally got in the game about the 3rd game of the year, and I fumbled when I was in the game, and I was sitting with my helmet on and on a bench, and I'm not advocating this, by the way. I'm just telling you because it's a story. Coach came in, and he saw me there, and he swiped me outside of the helmet, knocked me off the bench for fumbling. I went home, and I told my dad, I said, you know what, his name was Was. So you know what Was did? I described the whole thing. My dad said, you know what I think? I said, what? He said, don't fumble. So